Be'ezras Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Samach Beis. Okay, hold on. Hi, Alan. We just began. Okay, hold on. Oh, he just came in. Okay, hi, Alan. We just began. Okay, today's daf is Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Samach Beis, and we are holding by. We're going to start from Daf Samach Beis Amid Aleph. Today's Samach Beis 62. And we're going to just go over just something we briefly mentioned yesterday. Itmar, we had a machlekes between Abaya and Rava. This is going to come up again in the daf. A person, Ovid, I'm going to make it big. Ha'ovid avodah zarah, somebody worships idols, right? Okay, guy worships idols. Ha'ovid avodah zarah ma'ahava umiyira. Why would he worship avodah zarah? Because of love. Let's say he fell in love with a girl, and he agreed that he's going to serve this avodah zarah, and he's going to do whatever service this avodah zarah wants. But he really doesn't really believe in it. He doesn't believe it's a deity. Umiyira, or he worships this idol because he's afraid that something's going to happen to him. Let's say the guy is going to, beat him up. So the question over here is, if he was warned not to do it, he does it on purpose, or let's say he did it by mistake. So Abaya says chayiv. He's considered liable because even though you didn't mean it, at the end of the day, you're bowing to an idol. Rava Amapata. Rava says you're exempt. You're not held liable because you're doing it because of peer pressure, or you're afraid to be you're afraid of any damages the person's going to inflict upon you. Abaya Amachayev, the Gemara says the whole placha, because you actually bowed to the idol. Rava says pata. You're exempt because if you accept it as a god, so then yes, of course you're held liable because you're doing avodah zarah. But if you don't do it, if you're just doing it because of peer pressure or somebody, or you're afraid of somebody, so that's not considered something of avodah zarah, and you're exempt from punishment. Okay, and then the Gemara brought Abaya trying to prove his point. Now let's begin the Gemara on Daf Samach Beis Amud Aleph, about like 5 lines from the top. So the Gemara is going to bring a brisa and discuss another topic, and eventually we come back to this Abaya and Rava. But let's go on to another topic. The topic is like this: Tani Rab Zakkai Kamei de Rab Yochanan. Rab Zakkai taught in front of Rab Yochanan. We learned yesterday that there are certain, let's say, all-inclusive services that you could do for an avodah zarah, and you're held accountable. You violated the Isra of avodah zarah, even if it's not the normal way to serve this avodah zarah. So you'll still be held liable if you do it, and that is if you slaughter an animal to an idol, or you do incense, or you pour wine on the idol, or you bow to the idol. Okay, so we learned that those 4 services, no matter what the way to serve that idol is, as soon as you do those services, you're held accountable. So this Rabbi Zakkai came to Rabbi Yochanan and he brought a brisa. He said to Rabbi Yochanan, this is what it says in the brisa: Zibach, if someone slaughters in front of an idol, or Vikitar, and he does this also, he does incense in front of the idol. V'nisach, he poured a wine libation. V'ishtachava, and he bowed. Let's say he knew it was an idol, and he didn't know that these 4 things are usher. Now, each one has almost a separate pasuk you're not allowed to do for an idol, right? There's a pasuk that teaches you about bowing to an idol, and a pasuk teaches you about pouring to an idol, and there's a pasuk that teaches you don't shech to an idol. So he did it, and with one helam, he didn't know that these things are not permitted. So how many carbon chatas should he bring? Eino chayev ala achas. He's only chayev only one carbon chatas. Now let's think about that. If a man knows that it's Shabbos and he does cooking and he does sewing and he slaughters an animal on Shabbos, so we're going to learn that everybody that according to the way we understand it is that technically you chayev a carbon chatas for each malacha that you did. So if this guy, knows it's avodah zarah, but did a malacha of shechting, kiter, nisach, hishtachava, he should be chayev 4 carbon chatas. And Rabbi Zakkai said, no, you only chayev 1 carbon chatas. So that was the opinion of Rabbi Zakkai. So Amalei, so Rabbi Yochanan told Rabbi Zakkai, puk tanai l'ra, take this brisa and take it out of the Beis Medrash. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan totally disagreed and felt that this whole brisa was a big mistake. And Rabbi Yochanan held that you will be chayav 4 carbon chatas for each service that you did. Amar Rab Abba, so Rab Abba said, wait a second, why throw him out? Rabbi Zakkai, who brought the brisa, he will have a support on his side. Support that will say that even by Shabbos, if a person does many malachas on Shabbos, he knows it's Shabbos, but doesn't know that these part of the lamates malachas are us. So he doesn't know you're not allowed to cook on Shabbos, or you're not allowed to slaughter an animal, you're not allowed to grind on Shabbos. So according to some opinions, you're going to only be chayiv 1 carbon chatas. So Rabbi Abba says maybe Rabbi Zakkai goes with that opinion, and that opinion would be Rabbi Yossi. Because Hod Amar Rabbi Zakkai, Rabbi Abba said, Rabbi Zakkai said, could be a machlokes Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nassan. There could be the same machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Nassan. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. The Brisa says a very similar thing that what's happening by avodah zarah. The Torah tells you lo sasa b'lacha, don't do any work on Shabbos. Then the Torah says don't light a match on Shabbos. Don't lo savara eish. Don't start a fire on Shabbos. Why did the Torah tell you don't start a fire on Shabbos? The Torah already told you don't do any work on Shabbos. So the first opinion says havara lelav yotze de Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi says that the point was that the Torah wanted to go lenient on lighting a match on Shabbos, whereas every other malacha that you do on Shabbos you chayiv skila. The malacha of lighting a match on Shabbos, you don't get the death penalty. You only get a lav. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Rab Nassan says lechalek yotza. He says that no, the point of the Torah singling out havara is to teach you another idea, that just like when you light a match and you do it, you chayiv skila, and if you do it by mistake, you chayiv a korban chatas. So what the Torah is telling you, you divide up every malacha. In other words, if you know it's Shabbos and you did 5 different malacha Shabbos of the lamates malachas, for each one you're going to get a separate, l'chalek means to separate carbon chatas. So that's why the Torah separated out, telling you don't do havara, because just like if you're going to light a match on Shabbos, you're going to be chayiv carbon chatas. So also, if you do a bunch of malachas at the same time, you're going to be chayiv carbon chatas for each one. So what Rab Abba wanted to say, the Torah told you the same idea, the same methodology went on by avodah zarah, where the Torah tells you don't serve idols, and then the Torah says don't bow to an idol. Why did the Torah single out don't bow to an idol? So it must be the Torah is telling you this same achloikis. According to Rabbi Zakkai, Rabbi Zakkai is going to go with this opinion. According to Rabbi Yossi, who said that the reason Havara gets a minor lav, it doesn't get the death penalty on Shabbos because it's singled out from the crowd. So hishtachava, bowing, nami lelav yotza, would also be singled out, that whereas shechting and doing nisach yayin to a libations to avodah zarah, you get the death penalty. Bowing to an avodah zarah, you will not get the death penalty. And also, you don't have anywhere to learn that if you do a bunch of malachas at the same time, According to Rabbi Yossi, if you do a bunch of malachas at the same time, you're going to only be chayiv one korban chatas. So also by avodah zarah, if you do a bunch of malachas at the same time, you only chayiv one korban chatas. Laman di ama havara lechalik yotza. But according to the opinion that says by Shabbos, the whole point of singling out havara, not lighting a fire on Shabbos, is to tell you that every malacha Shabbos gets its own korban chatas. So same thing by avodah zarah. When you do a bunch of avodas services for the avodah zarah, each one is going to get its own korban chatas by the mere fact that the Torah singled out hishtachavo nami lechalek yotza. The Torah singled out an extra pasuk not to bow to avodah zarah to teach you that if you're going to do a bunch of, it's avodah zarah, but you do a bunch of services to the avodah zarah, for each one you're going to be chayiv a korban chatas. So what the Gemara just established, that Rab Zakkai and Rab Yochanan could be a machlokes tanoim, this is the machlokes tanoim that you have on Shabbos. And the premise of the machlokes tanoim is based on that there is an opinion that even by Shabbos you would not be chayiv, you would not be held accountable to bring a separate korban chatas for each avera. Says the Gemara, Maskeh la Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef questioned that. Maybe everybody by Shabbos holds that the first step is always to say Yekayv a separate korban chatas. But the reason why the opinion says Lelav Yotza, the reason why Rabbi Yossi said Lelav Yotza, he's because he had another pasuk to teach you that you get a separate korban chatas. So therefore, he had an extra to teach you that by Havara you'll only get a lav. So therefore, by avodah zarah, if you don't have an extra pasuk to teach you that you get a separate korban chatas for each, so you will say lechalek yotza, that the whole point is that the Torah singled out hashtachavo to make it harder on a person, that if you're going to do many services, you're going to be chayiv a korban chatas for each, and that's what Rav Yosef is about to say. Rav Yosef says, Dilma, let us say, At kan lekom Rabbi Yossi hasam havara lelav yotza. The reason why Rabbi Yossi said by Shabbos you can go easy, the nafkele chilik malachas me'achas mehena. He learns that you know that you bring separate korban chatas for each malacha from another pasuk. The Tanya Rabbi Yossi himself said, the pasuk says by a korban chatas that you bring a korban chatas if you do ma'achas mehena, if you do one avera. Now the Torah could have said one avera, and Korah said these averas. Why does it say mem and mem? So the Torah is teaching you shechayev achas al kulam, shechayev al kol achas va'achas. Sometimes you chayev one korban chatas if you do many averas, and sometimes you chayev many korban chatas. And I'll explain before the Gemara explains. Sometimes you chayev many different korban chatas if you do many averas. For example, you know it's Shabbos, but you don't know 5 malachas are asur. So then, each time you do if you do 5 different malachas, you chayev of korban chatas for each. But what happens? You know that these malachas are asur on Shabbos. You know the lamates malachas back and forward, but you think today is Tuesday. You didn't know it's Shabbos. So then you did basically one avera, even though you did many averas, you violated all 39. But it's the basic premise of your mistake that you think it's Tuesday. There, you'll be chayiv only one korban chatas. V'am Rabbi Yossi explain. My time with Rabbi Yossi. What's the reason of Rabbi Yossi? The pasuk says v'achas ma'achas mehena, achas ma'achas heina mehena, achas shu yehena, v'heina shu achas. And we darshan the pasuk this way. Achas, the Torah is telling you if you do one avera on Shabbos, if you wrote the Shimon, if you wrote out, let's say Shimon on Shabbos, so you get an avera. Me'achas, sometimes you do a partial malacha, and you still chayiv a korban chatas because you wrote Shem Mishimon, the word Shin Mem from the word Shimon. The word Shin Mem from Shimon spells a word. Shem means name. So even if you intended to write the word Shimon and you wrote only the word Shin Mem, you chayiv a korban chatas. Heina teaches you avos, that if you do the avos malachas, you chayiv a korban chatas. Meheina, if you do the toldos, you chayiv a korban chatas. And here's the point. Achas heina, from this pasuk you learn Zedoin Shabbos Shigigas Malachas. If you know it's Shabbos and you did many malachas, then Achas Shehihenu. You're going to do one avera, right? You're going to do one avera Shehihena, which you're going to have to bring many korban chatases, which is one avera of each malacha will require you to bring a separate korban chaktas because you know it's Shabbos. Hey nashi achas. Let's say you did many averas and you're required to bring only one korban. Is Shigiga Shabbos is doin malachas. If you mistakenly thought it's Tuesday, but you know these malachas are also. So basically, you made only one mistake. So you're there, even though you did many averas, you're going to chayav to bring one korban chatas. So therefore, by Shabbos, I have a separate pasuk that teaches you. Rabbi Yossi teaches you that lechalek yotza. That's why Rabbi Yossi went and said Havara teaches you something else. Lelav yotza. Aval hacha by avodah zarah. We don't know that chiluk malachas that you get a separate korban chatas from any other place. The kuliyama, everybody will agree, and that everybody would hold this opinion that by avodah zarah you have to bring a separate korban chatas for each. Because if the pasuk is singling out don't bow, it's teaching you something strict. And it's teaching you that if you're going to do bow and shecht and you do all these things, you're going to have to bring a korban chatas. So basically what the Gemara is saying is, Rabbi Zakkai is wrong because he has no Tana to support him. Now the Gemara asks a question. Okay, maybe Rabbi Zakkai is wrong, for another reason. Because from this pasuk, the pasuk by korban chatas should teach you that even by avodah zarah you should separate. You shouldn't be chayiv one korban chatas. Rabbi Zakkai said that if you do many different avodas on avodah zarah, you chayiv only one korban chatas. So the Gemara is just going to try to say that maybe Rabbi Zakkai is wrong because the pasuk of the Asam Achas Mehema could teach you even by avodah zarah you chayiv many different chatas. Chilik malachas avodah nami tepik lebe achas mehena. Achas zvicha me achas simen echad heina avay zibuach kita nisav ashtachava. Mehena has told us shava makal lefnei. I'm not going to go into it. And maybe the pasuk you're going to say is going on avodah zarah because avodah zarah gets a korban chatas also. Achashihi eina. If you do one, you do one avera, and you're gonna have to bring many korban chatas. Means the doin avodah zarah. You know it's avodah zarah ushigigas avodas, but you didn't know these malachas are asur. Or heino shehi achas will teach you the opposite. Shigigas avodah zarah us doin avodas. And if you know you made a mistake, you didn't know it's avodah zarah, but you know that you're not allowed to serve these avodah, you're not allowed to do these avodas for an avodah zarah. There you'll be chayiv only one korban chatas. So what the Gemara is saying is a bomb question against Rabbi Zakkai. Rabbi Zakkai got through saying that if you do many different malachas for avodah zarah, you chayiv one korban chatas. Why don't I learn from the pasuk va'asa ba'achas mehena, which is a general pasuk that it's referring to also avodah zarah. It's not just referring to Shabbos; it's referring to avodah zarah also, and it's teaching you when you have a case of zadoin avodah zarah, shigigas avodas. If you have a case of many different avodas, you know it's avodah zarah, but you didn't know these are aser. You chayiv many different karbanos. So Rabbi Zakkai is for sure wrong. So the Gemara says the Gemara is just going to try to say that the pasuk. The Rabbi Zakkai is not wrong because of that pasuk, because that pasuk cannot be talking about avodah zarah. Because hi shigigas avodah zarah hechidami, what's that talking about? The second part, how could you make a mistake on avodah zarah and make a mistake? You don't know if it's avodah zarah, and you did these services, and it turns out that you did something wrong. If you walk into a cathedral and you think it's a shul, and you bow to it. So you made a mistake. You didn't know it's a cathedral, and you walked in and bowed to it. So you didn't do anything wrong. Your heart is thinking, I thought this is a shul, so you didn't do anything wrong. Ella, it must be a case would be the chaza andarta v'sagadle. You saw a statue of a king, let's say, and you bowed to it. So now, because you didn't know that people bow to it and the statue of the king and accept that king as a god. So that's also, you didn't do anything wrong. If you purposely bow it and say, I believe this king is my god, mezeru, that's called a mezid. So that's not a mistake in avodah zarah. If you don't accept it as a god, loy klum, that means nothing. Ella, so what would be a case of shigigas avodah zarah? You made a mistake and you did the Aveira of avodah zarah, uzdoin avodas, but you did the services on purpose. Ella mi'ahav of a guy worshipped idols, thinking that if you worship idols under pressure or peer pressure or afraid, you didn't violate anything. And therefore, he did it. So therefore, you'll be chayav one carbon chatas for that. So the Gemara says, that makes sense according to Abaya, who says in that case you did something wrong and you'll be liable to bring a carbon chatas. But what are you going to say about that? Rava says you're not liable. So how could you again interpret this pasuk referring to Avodah Zarah? According to Rava, you're not going to be able to find something. Ella must be ba'oiber mutter. You said that something is mutter. You said that ba'oiber mutter. In other words, he didn't know that what shigigas, if a guy did many avodas, he didn't even know that the Torah asked avodah zarah at all, and that's how he made this mistake and worshipped avodah zarah. So he didn't learn chumash at all, and therefore he would only be mechayev to bring one karban chatas. Says the Gemara, tifshet. Then let us answer this question. The Rava asked the question of if someone didn't know of Shabbos and didn't know the malachas of Shabbos, does he bring one carbon chatas or 39 carbon chatas? Maybe let us conclude that you only chayiv only one, because that's how you're interpreting the pasuk over here, ba'omer mutter, that you only chayiv one. So the Gemara says, "Halei kasha tishrei." Let us interpret it by that the pasuk is talking about Avodah Zarah or Shabbos, and you didn't know it's Shabbos, and you didn't know these malachas are aser, you didn't know it's Avodah Zarah, and you don't know anything about Avodah Zarah or anything that's aser to do for Avodah Zarah. So basically, the Gemara at this point concludes that the pasuk va'achas mehena teaches you that by Avodah Zarah, if you know it's Avodah Zarah, but you didn't know these malachas are also, that pasuk will teach you chayev separate carbon chatases. So the Gemara rejects that totally, and he says like this: Mi maitzis la'atza hani kroi b'Avodah Zarah. Can you say these psukim are talking about Avodah Zarah? The ilhachik sibim shiach pavanasi sarav yachid kisba v'sira. That pasuk differentiates by these type of carbon chatas that if you're a kohen, you bring a par. If you're a nasi, you're going to bring a sa'ir, a goat. A yachid, if you're an individual that does this aveira, you're going to bring a female sheep or female goat. And if this pasuk was talking about Avodah Zarah, this wouldn't make sense, because v'ilu b'Avodah Zarah tanan v'shavim shebasira ki yachid, that we agree, that everybody agrees that even a kohen Mashiach would also bring a female goat. So these psukim, achas mehena, that pasuk over there, cannot be talking about Avodah Zarah. Sulay midi, there's nothing to discuss any further. So bottom line, what you're walking away now is so far, and we'll stop in 2-3 minutes. Bottom line, you should walk away from this sugya is that there really was a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan, that if someone knows it's Avodah Zarah and does a couple of malachos, Rabbi Yochanan said, if you did it by mistake, you chayiv a carbon chatas for every service that you did, just like on Shabbos. If you know it's Shabbos, but you don't know cooking and sewing and shechting is also on Shabbos, you chayiv a carbon chatas for each. But Rabbi Zakkai said, and Rabbi Zakkai basically seems to not have any support. Rabbi Zakkai said that no, you only by Avodah Zarah you only chayiv one carbon chatas, and the Gemara wanted to figure out a person that would support Rabbi Zakkai, but they didn't conclude it, which is why Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Zakkai walked into the shul and said this brisa. Rabbi Yochanan said, step outside, it's totally wrong. One more thing and then we'll stop. Ki also Rab Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar. Now, another 2 minutes. Ki also Rab Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar, he said, there was another brisa that Rabbi Zakkai walked in and Rabbi Yochanan threw him out. We go to Amar Beis. Choyme b'Shabbos b'shar mitzvos. Choyme b'shar mitzvos b'Shabbos. Choyme b'Shabbos b'Shabbos also shtayim b'helam echa chayva kol achas v'achas. Masha ein kein b'shar mitzvos. Choyme b'shar mitzvos b'shar mitzvos shagah b'lem skav v'chayiv. Masha ein kein b'Shabbos. So this was the brisa, a little brisa. Doesn't make so much sense yet, but what the brisa says on Shabbos is more stricter than other mitzvahs. So what the Gemara is going to try to say, that Shabbos is more stricter than Avodah Zarah. Whereas Shabbos, if you do many malachas, you chayev on each one, and regarding Avodah Zarah, you only be chayev one chatas. This is exactly what Rab Zakkai said before. And then the Brisa tries to reverse it. So Amamar, let's try to read the brisa. Chayme b'Shabbos, Shabbos shtei masa. Hechidami. What does this mean that you chayiv a carbon katas for each avera you do on Shabbos? Ilema da'avet ketzirat china. You know it's Shabbos, and you did cutting and grinding on Shabbos. The kavase gaba shar mitzvahs. If shar mitzvahs refers to any mitzvah that you do two different averas, so the achal chela v'dam, if you eat the fats and the blood, so then you should be chayiv two carbon chatas by other mitzvahs. Harcha tarti mechayiv, harcha tarti mechayiv. Ella, what does it mean? Gabashar mitzvahs de'ena chayav ela achas heichidami. What would that case be? That if you do one of the mitzvahs, you only chayav only one. What would that be? The achal chel v'chel. If you ate fats and fats, so therefore you only chayav one. The kavase gabay Shabbos, so also by Shabbos, the other ktsira, if you cut and cut. So this brisa makes totally no sense. The brisa says Shabbos is different than any other mitzvah. Every mitzvah on Shabbos, if you do averis, you get two chatas. On every other mitzvah, you only have one karma chatas. It makes no sense if you interpret shar mitzvahs to refer to other mitzvahs, like other averis, like eating not kosher. Because if you're going to eat chaylev and you eat nevela, they're two different averas. So even by other mitzvahs, you should be chayiv two carbon chatas, the same way you chayiv two carbon chatas by Shabbos. So this brisa made no sense. Hainu the amalei puk tanul lebra. That's why Rabbi Yochanan told him to take this brisa outside. Now we're going to conclude over here. My kusha, what's so difficult about this brisa? I will tell you the avid ktsira tchina. By Shabbos, you did Ketzira Utchini. You did two malachas, and therefore you have two carbon chatas. And Masha Ein came b'shar mitzvahs. What it means by other mitzvahs? If you do two malachas, you chayiv only one carbon chatas, and that is asun l'avodah zarah. That is the avodah zarah case. Kiddur Rabami. Rabami said exactly what Rabbi Zakkai said. Clear in a brisa. Rabami said it on his own. Zibach bekita. That if you do a couple of malachas and you didn't know it's avodah zarah, but you did all these malachas not knowing that these malachas are asar, you chayav only one carbon chata. So here we have a brisa that supports Rabbi Zakkai. Okay, we will stop right over here.
Interesting. Thank you.
So the way we concluded it so far is that Rabbi Zakkai, who brought this brisa, seemed to interpret the brisa as comparing Shabbos to avodah zarah. Whereas Shabbos, you'll chayav a different carbon chatas for every avera, for every malacha, and avodah zarah, you're only going to be chayav one. But that's only if you interpret the word shar mitzvahs referring to avodah zarah. But the Gemara is going to have a problem with that, because then the end of the brisa doesn't make sense to be interpreted referring to avodah zarah. The end of the brisa says that shar mitzvahs is more stricter than Shabbos. Shar mitzvahs shogeg beloy miskavein. If you made a mistake, you had no intention to do the avera, and you did the avera chayiv. So mashen came Shabbos, you had no intention to do the avera, and you did the avera, you're exempt. But that wouldn't make sense. Tani Seifa, the end of the brisa says, so in any mitzvah, and you said the word shar mitzvah refers to avodah zarah. If you make a mistake and no intention to do the avera, you're chayiv. How would that work out? What are we talking about? How is it possible to make a mistake in avodah zarah and end up doing the avera? If you walk into a cathedral and think it's a basic knesses, vishtachvel, and you bow to it, you didn't do any avera because your heart is to heaven, and therefore you didn't do the avera. You saw a statue and you bow to it. If you accept it as a deity, so then you're not a shoygig. And if you don't accept it, and you just you bow to that statue, thinking you're just not bowing to a deity, and you're not accepting that statue as a god, like Klumu, you didn't do anything wrong. Ella means me'ava mira. It means you did something wrong. because you bow to an avodah zarah on peer pressure, on afraid of something that somebody's going to hurt you, thinking you're not doing anything wrong. And it turns out you do something wrong because bowing to a Hava Yira is something wrong. Says the Gemara, that would make sense. Abaya, who said you're chayiv. El Rava Dama Pata, according to Rava, he didn't do anything wrong there either. So how would you say that shogag b'loy miskaven chayiv by avodah zara? Ella ba'oyim mutar. It must be the guy said that it's mutar. He thought there is no concept of avodah zara in the Torah. So then you're going to say ma'ashenkin b'Shabbos, the pater legamrei. You're going to be exempt. A guy never heard of Shabbos before in his life, and then he violated the whole Shabbos, and then they tell him, oh, by the way, in the Torah it says you can't work on Shabbos. So in that case, you don't have to bring a carbon chatas. That's not true. The question is are you going to be chayiv two carbon chatas for every avera, for every malacha, or are you going to chayiv one carbon chatas because you never heard of Shabbos in your life? But nobody says you don't have to bring anything. So therefore, this brisa would not make sense if shar mitzvahs refers to avodah zara. So the whole brisa is a mistake. So the Gemara says, "My kusha." We said the beginning of the brisa refers to avodah zara. I agree with that. But seifa b'shar mitzvahs, and the end of the brisa is talking about other mitzvahs. And what kind of a mitzvah would, if you make a mistake and not knowing what you're doing, you did the Avera anyway, and Shabbos you would be exempt. It's called Shogag B'Loy Miskaven, the Ksovar. He thinks he's picking up like treifa food, and he says, "Roiki, I thought it's spit." Ubaylay, and he swallowed it. And turns out it was a treifa piece of meat. So then you're held liable because at the end of the day, your soul, your body benefited from it. Mashenkin b'Shabbos, Shabbos, you would not be held liable, the potter, because that's called a misasek. If a person on Shabbos thought he's picking up a detached flower, and by accident it was attached, and he cut something that was attached to the ground, potter, because that was not, he had no intention to take something attached to the ground. So therefore, that would be the case with Shabbos. He would be potter, and Shar mitzvahs would be chayv. Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, because like Rav Nachman Shmuel says, Hamas Asek b'chalav marayis, someone who somehow did something with fats, with treif, or did avoid gilei arayis nus. He didn't know what he was doing, but at the end of the day, his body had hana'ah, benefit from it. Chayiv, you held liable. Shekei nehena. The guy is busy on Shabbos. He banged on a table and the light went on. So he didn't do anything. That was not his intention. Torah says in order to be liable on Shabbos, you have to have in mind to do some type of work. So the point is, so the way to make this brisa make sense and to agree to what Rabbi Zakkai tried to say, and Rabbi Ami tried to say, that by avodah zara you chayav one chatas, whereas Shabbos, if you know it's Shabbos and you did many melachos, you chayav many karban chatas, is if you interpret the beginning of the brisa, the beginning of this brisa, chayim b'shabbos shar mitzvahs, this shar mitzvahs, the brisa is referring to avodah zara. In order to make the end of the brisa make sense, you're going to have to say that shar mitzvahs refers to other type of averas, which means chelev and arayas. So the brisa uses the same word and means two different things. In the beginning of the brisa, it's going to mean avodah zara, and the end of the brisa, shar mitzvahs, means gilei arayas and chelev. So that was why Rabbi Yochanan didn't like this brisa. Rabbi Yochanan Tamei, the loy metaik masnisha reisha b'chad tama v'sefer chad tama. He doesn't like to turn a brisa and that the beginning of the brisa it means one way and it goes according to one opinion, and the end of the brisa same word means something else or it goes according to another opinion. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Man the matargim lichavis alib dechat tada mavlin man b'asrei lebei mesusa." Rabbi Yochanan had a similar problem in Masechta Bava, and he couldn't figure out how the Mishnah could work according to one Tana. And if he says, if whoever can figure this out, that this Mishnah goes according to one opinion, I'm going to carry his clothing to the bathhouse. That means I'll become his Talmud. So Rabbi Yochanan doesn't like to interpret Mishnayos according to two different opinions, and he doesn't certainly like to interpret a brisa which uses the same word and it means something else. In the beginning of the brisa, it refers to avodah zarah, shar mitzvahs. In the end of the brisa, it refers to gila rayas and chalev. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan disregarded this brisa. And again, Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is if a guy knows it's avodah zarah and does a couple of malachas of avodah zarah, he's chayav a carbon chatas for each and every one, and not like Rab Zakkai and Rab Amai said. Okay, let me stop here.